Baby, it's not that hard. If you know your history, then you can make better choices in life.
Acres Homes, an African-American community located just 10 miles north of downtown Houston, was established during the First World War in the early 1900s. Many still debate about the name of the community. Some refer to it as Acreage Homes, Acreage Homes, Acres Homes, Acres Homes, the Fofo. However, when Wright first platted the community, he named it Acre Homes.
And the reason why they called it Acres Home, you know that, right? The reason why it was called Acres Home because you could buy lots by acres, and which was quite different from the way they were selling lots in other places, and it was pretty big acres.
Alfred A. Wright platted it into two subdivisions, the Highland Acre Homes Edition in 1910 and the Highland Heights Edition in 1913.
I've been here ever since I come out here when I was 18 years old. When we had dirt roads, streets, dirt roads and streets. We built up me and my mother built the house from the ground up. A little 4-room house.
My first place that I owned was a little shotgun house. 2 bedrooms, and kitchen, but that's what they call it then, this little shotgun. In fact, the business is down on Wilberforce now.
We moved here. My mother moved here when I was 15 in order to give me a better chance of graduating from a accredited high school. And I graduated from Booker T. Washington High School, which was then located downtown, just a few blocks from City Hall.
Alfred A. Wright, the developer, owned Wright Land and Security for his white clients and Wright Land Company for his black clients. You could purchase an acre of land for $120 with a $5 down payment and $5 monthly mortgage.
The land was cheap, and I remember that my mother paid $10 down and $10 a month on buying property.
This gave the working class black person a chance to own land. The cheap land, low taxes, the easy, slow-paced life in wide open spaces attracted black families to the community. The area, once dairy land owned by the Jews in the early 1800s, was occupied by blacks and dairy farms all the way down to Spring, Texas. Most of the blacks worked on the dairy farms for the Jews, and it has been said that the Jews made sure that those men and women were well taken care of when it came time for them to sell their land and leave the area. The history is rich, and so is the spirit of the people. This is the untold story of Acres Homes 100 years later. The community will be built on a strong faith in God, education, unity, and self-reliability.
You know, the church, And the schools was the thrive of the community. It was the thrust of the community. And everything was centered around the churches or the schools, but there was such a unity. You know, a lot of racism, you saw it and you heard about it when you left out of Acres Home.
You know, we used to have grocery stores, we used to have clothing stores, we used to have pharmacies, doctors. And all of this is you know, it just disappearing. You know, little by little it's disappearing.
When I first remembered Acres Home, it was a very thriving community, self-contained community. We had all the services that community needed. We had plumbers, we had doctors, we had laundry service, bus service, grocery stores, restaurants, we had everything in Acres Home.
J. Leonard Smith once said, "In Acres Homes, you could build a house piece by piece. You didn't have to have money. You worked in the daytime and built at night. They may have been shacks, but we owned them, and we owned them without mortgages."
I'm proud of that because the people who did that were hardworking, independent people of the neighborhood, and it gave them an opportunity to have something without having to have it financed. It was something that most of the people did here. In fact, my mom and dad on the property where we lived on Little York, they had 3 different houses. You know, a small one in the front, a medium, and then a big white house in the back. And I'm sure Mr. Sampson probably moved some of those in there.
Mr. Sampson, he was a marvelous man. He moved houses with mules. He jacked the house up and put some beams under it and moved your house with a set of mules. It was great. It was great. Had a big family, and he was a true trooper. Say it that way. I love Mr. Sampson.
The build as you go technique was something that wasn't afforded to many blacks outside the Acres Homes community. Because of the strict building laws, low incomes, and the discrimination in the loan business. Often referred to as the sticks, the woods, and the country because of its rural agrarian lifestyle. They had no electric lights, no running water, and unpaved dirt roads. They would grow vegetables, raise pigs, chickens, cows, and horses. They were 100% self-reliant.
We were never hungry. My family believed in raising big gardens. They even had contests. All those brothers, they would come through with different things. I had an uncle that did purple, I think it was purple okra, and that was fascinating. But you know, they raised their food. Daddy Arthur, I call him Daddy Arthur, his name is Arthur Levingston. He raised hogs. We were never without meat. I always make a joke, we ate everything but the oink. But and we shared. Now that was the big thing for us. We shared. If other people didn't have it, we would give it to them.
We had no water, no running water. We had no lights. So we had no telephones. So if you can imagine that, it was very rural. But you know what? It seemed kind of normal at the time, even though we missed these services and worked hard, tried to get them.
Oh yes, plenty trails and trees. We walked to everywhere. We walked through the trails, around the trails, and down the so-called streets. And sometimes they'd be so muddy your shoes would go in there. So most people usually walk barefooted.
The residents remember this time as a time where you could actually sleep in your house, doors open, windows up, and nothing or nobody was going to bother you.
I was safe. I used to walk from where we are now down to Little York, 1621 West Little York, through trails, on the street and through trails, and I did it the whole time I was growing up, from say I was 5 years old till I was 20, and I just walked back and forth. Nobody would bother you. You were safe. There was very little crime out here.
Most of our leaders that I can remember were ministers. We had Reverend Bailey, M.C. Williams.
Those were the basic churches in this area that I can remember the most. But all of us shared Bible school together. Right. And so we would go from one Bible school, and they would kind of schedule them as strangely that none of them would coincide. So most of our summer kids, that's what kind of brought the unity about, because we would go from Bible school to Bible school and work with those different churches.
As the community life continued to revolve around family and fellowship, the first church organized in the community in 1913, Galilee Missionary Baptist Church. It would serve as more than a church. With the growth of the community came a growth in the congregation. And with that came a civic club whose goal was to seek advantages for the people.
Well, we had to work for the city to incorporate us, and of course all of that went along together. So many nights we spent at a meeting trying to organize and push the city to help us in this area. And do you know what? Some of the citizens out here protested against us getting running water and lights. You can't imagine that, can you? That you would protest improving your area, and the opposition mainly was that the senior citizens could not pay for it. And, you know, that was just beyond me. And so I was one of the main ones who was pushing the city to give us all the services that we needed. And that was a hard thing to do.
Those fights for advancement of their people wouldn't be for nothing. And in 1915, the White Oak Color School would be established by the Harris County Common School District number 26. In its establishment, it served 23 students, ranging from ages 8 to 21. The board, which was then composed entirely of Negro men, had arranged for the students to be housed in a small church building. They studied reading, writing, and simple arithmetic. But by the early 1930s, the school had advanced to teaching students up to the 7th grade. This caused the patrons to want and desire more. The White Oak School Board would go on to make a plea to the county, asking for relief for better educational facilities. As a result of that plea, the White Oak District would be annexed into the Aldine Independent District. The school would see lots of progress within the next 10 years. The training plan would include courses all the way up to the 9th grade. And in 1941, the school would hire Mr. A.B. Anderson, who would suggest the school to have a name change. They called it George Washington Carver School, in honor of the great Negro scientist. Mr. Anderson would go on to make many positive changes to the school, students, and the community. His great works would go on to earn him a recognition in the district, as they would name an elementary school in the community in his honor. Like Mr. Anderson, there would be several prominent figures in this community. By the 1950s, this black community would continue to thrive despite segregation and Jim Crow laws. Negro Life magazine would describe Acres Homes as the largest Negro community in the United States. It was like many other suburbs that sprung up in the age of the automobile and transit era. Except this community was Acres Homes, and its residents were all black. Like many other self-reliant cities, Acres Homes would have its own business hub too. There were 2 main streets in the area: Yale Street Road, renamed West Montgomery, and Mel Route Road, renamed West Little Yard. They would own and operate the first black-owned hardware store in Texas. In that story, the Smith family also operated a contract post office. It would be the first post office in Acres Homes. More residents would come to the community migrating from other parts of the city, mainly the different wards. With more people coming from all over the city, those residents would need a form of transportation to maintain those jobs that weren't held in the community. Before the formation of the transit company, the residents would use the jitneys, small used taxis, driven by independent operators. The operators of the small taxis were usually residents of the community.
Anyway, jitneys were people from the neighborhood who would give you a ride, and you give them quarter or 50 cents or 40 cents, and you would go safely to wherever you were trying to go. That was the precursor, I think, for the cab stands that came on later. That was another. We had several of those in the neighborhood, and those were independent businesses run by my people.
But the jitneys weren't always reliable, and they were in open violation of the transportation codes. So even though lots of residents would use them, many relied on the Yale Street Transit. But when the Yale Street bus line terminated their rights in the community without warning, the leaders of the community were quick to precipitate an action plan to get the community moving again. The formation of a transit company in 1959 by the Harrison Elmores, who had also owned a dry goods store in the community, and several other leaders would once again make history. For the first time in the history of the southern United States, African Americans would own and operate a bus franchise, and it would be called the Acres Home Transit Company. The company would run up to 40 round trips daily from downtown Houston to Acres Homes.
Frank Maxey, his son is the minister at the church right over here on West Montgomery. Mr. Maxey drove for that company for many years. He was a member of this community. He and then a man named Mr. Berkeley Bolden, he was a bus driver for that company, and they, provided a service, hard-working, independent men who took care of their families and did something positive for Acres.
I was proud to be able to ride on that bus.
Some believe that integration will push us further and give us the same opportunities as others. But for many in this community that had thrived without it, the belief was that integration would be the cause of the end of this black Mecca.
In ninth grade year, they bused us to Farmville, which was probably one of the most detrimental times of my life I can remember. Because one of the statements that Julius Hester made, the band teacher, and I will never forget that, is that we don't want y'all here and y'all don't want to be here. But it's the state law, and so ain't nothing we can do about it.
Very fine without integration. But I guess might have did something great for us, I don't know. But to me, I'm not wanting to agree with it.
And in 1964, George Sampson, a resident of the community, would do more than just talk about integration. The same man that had moved homes into this community with his moving company would make a move that would affect us till today, when he filed a lawsuit against Aldine Independent School District for racial discrimination against his two sons after he attempted to enroll them in an all-white Aldine high school. Sampson would go on to win the case, but the district wouldn't integrate until a year later.
It's a lawsuit for integration, right? So that why couldn't the kids out here attend the same Aldine high school that was in our district? And I know that the suit was won, and that a couple of years later integration started. I think at first they sent out like a couple of Caucasian teachers to Carver High School. I remember that. One lady would drive all the way from Huntsville, Texas, and another lady came here. And those were the two teachers. And then for a couple of years, one of them left, and then after that, they started busing the students to Aldine, and they also took some of the teachers from Carver High School, and they went to Aldine.
And following integration, annexation wouldn't be too far behind. Longtime resident Beulah Shepherd, also known as the mayor of Acres Homes, would devote 30 years of activism to this community, lobbying for better living conditions.
She did a lot working with our councilmen and working through the system, trying to get improvements. And she was one of our great, I'll say, civic workers.
The city would honor her hard work to the community by renaming the Acres Homes Library in her honor. By 1974, the entire community will become annexed. And just as quick as the whites were moving out of their neighborhoods, the blacks in Acres Homes were migrating elsewhere too. The community would keep afloat throughout the 70s, but the 80s we will see a change that we all know and still recognize today. In the early 80s, a lot of soldiers began to return home from the Vietnam War, and they would not be the only ones migrating to the States. In 1975, Congress passes the Indochina Migration and Refugee Assistance Act, which allowed Vietnamese refugees to enter the United States under a special status and allocated $405 million in resettlement aid. By the early 80s, African American communities would get a knock on its door, and it was one that would change the dynamics of the community forever. But now, instead of the Harrison and Elmore dry goods and Hopkins grocery, there were Vietnamese-owned grocery and corner markets everywhere. And although their welcome may not have been a warm welcome into the community, eventually the Vietnamese families will become a part of the community and a part of the community's history. They are.
Man, we used to go to Carver Park on Sundays for a while. It rotated to Lincoln City Park, then it would rotate back and forth. I mean, you know, it was just a nice gathering. Everybody out having a nice time, you know. I mean, you know, it had its ruckus go on with it, but man, it was a nice time in the community at that time. People was having fun, and you know, it was most of just people being poor still having fun. That's, you know, that's kind of like the whole theme of it.
It's a tradition that Mayor Turner made sure he continued with his annual Family Day in the Park event. Each year, it gets bigger and better.
For Fun Day in the Park, it's one of my mom's favorite events because she goes out there and she get the line dancing, so it's cool to see all the, you know, the older women out there getting it, you know, and having fun and staying in shape. So that's my main thing that I like about Fun Day in the Park, you know.
Young ladies sat in the shade enjoying their grandkids' play as they ate delicious sausage and turkey legs. The Carver Houston Ensemble Dance Team had everyone dancing in the park. The best part of it was that they were all dressed up in fantastic animal costumes. And of course, we could not help seeing people strutting their moves out there.
Today, Acres Homes is attempting to get back to its roots. It's a progress, but it's my hope that after this story is told, we will understand the history so that we can prepare for the future. Burns Barbecue, started in Acres Homes in 1988 by Roy Burns, has reopened and is now owned and operated by his sons and grandsons. Mills Dental, a black-owned dentist from the community, has returned to offer the residents great and affordable dental work. Unicorn Academy, licensed in 1986 by the Wooten family, is still operating as a service to the community, caring for generations of kids. Pee-wee's Snack Shop is still holding on and promised to provide the community with low prices while maintaining a good quality. Leonard's is still serving the community and the students of MC Williams. Galilee Missionary Baptist Church is still providing fellowship 100 years later. Mayor Turner, a native resident of the community, is a living example of the greatness that was created right here in Acres Homes. He is the promise that anything is possible. And so many others have shown what being a product of this great community means. My name is Ulavia Dilworth, and this is a documentary about my community, 100 years later.
100 years later, I still have pride.
100 years later, I still have pride. Acres Home pride. 4-4.
100 years later, I still have pride.
100 years later, I still have pride.
I'm proud of it. Where I'm at. 100 years later, I'll still have pride in Acres Home.